Okay, so welcome back, everyone. We are diving into a phrase today that's, well, it's a little creepy, honestly, wickedness in the blood.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like something out of I don't know, like a Gothic novel or something.
Right. Definitely gives you the chills. But it's a phrase that raises a lot of questions, especially about human nature, right? Like, where does this idea even come from?
Well, I mean, think about it. Wickedness in the blood. Just those three words, it's almost like they're trying to tell us that evil is like a physical thing, like a disease,
Yeah, like something you can inherit, like blue eyes or something. Yikes.
It's definitely a powerful image. And it makes you wonder, right? Like how much of who we are, good or bad, is actually predetermined.
Exactly. So before we get too freaked out, let's maybe unpack this phrase a little bit. First off, when we say in the blood, we're obviously not talking about something literal here.
Right. Of course not. It's a metaphor, a way of describing something that's passed down through generations.
But still, it's a pretty loaded metaphor, don't you think? It's got this whole history behind it, full of all sorts of, well, baggage.
Absolutely. This phrase has been used to justify some pretty terrible things throughout history. Like, think about the idea of blood purity or tainted bloodlines. It's been used to discriminate against certain groups of people for centuries.
Yeah, that's the dark side of this whole concept.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if maybe it's a phrase we should just retire altogether, huh?
Well, I don't know about that. I think even though it's a problematic phrase, it still speaks to something that we're, I think, kind of obsessed with as humans, this idea of nature versus nurture. Are we born a certain way or are we shaped by our experiences?
Yeah. The classic debate. And this phrase, wickedness in the blood, it definitely leans heavily on the nature side of things, doesn't it? Like it's saying we're kind of stuck with whatever we inherit from our ancestors.
Right. And that's where things get, well, tricky. Because scientifically speaking, the idea of inherited wickedness just doesn't hold up. We know that genetics plays a role in who we are, of course, but it's not the whole story.
So if our genes aren't destining us to be evil masterminds or something, what is it then? What actually makes people do bad things?
Well, like I said, it's complicated. It's a mix of factors, right? Your genes, your upbringing, your environment, your choices, all of that stuff comes into play.
So it's kind of a relief in a way, right? It means we're not just puppets of our DNA, but it also makes things a lot messier, doesn't it?
It does. And that's actually a good thing because it means we can't just write people off as inherently bad. Everyone has the potential for both good and evil.
And maybe that's the real takeaway here. This whole idea of wickedness in the blood, it's a reminder that we need to be careful about the language we use.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, because the way we talk about things, it shapes the way we think about them.
And the way we think about things can have some pretty serious consequences. I mean, if we believe that some people are just born bad, it can lead to all sorts of prejudice and discrimination.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to remember that everyone is an individual. We can't just lump people together based on their family history or anything like that.
Right. We need to judge people based on their actions, not on some preconceived notion of who they are. And, I think it's important to remember that people can change. We're not all destined to follow in the footsteps of our ancestors.
I completely agree. It's really all about recognizing that we have the power to choose who we want to be. And that's a pretty empowering thought, I think.
It is. So even though this whole wickedness in the blood thing is kind of a dark and twisted concept, I think it ultimately leads us to a pretty positive conclusion.
I think so, too. It's a reminder that we're all capable of both good and bad, and that we have the power to choose which path we want to take.
And that's a pretty hopeful message, actually. So thank you. That was enlightening, I got to say.
My pleasure.
For all of you listening, keep those brains churning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
See you.